Hey guys, and welcome back to the Iron Crown Workshop. So today we have something really exciting to share with you guys, which is that we have one of the world's best armorers, William West, joining us to help us understand how the human hand's function works within an armored gauntlet. Here at Iron Crown Workshop, we've been working through a series on making these Italian gauntlets, and Will West's information and insights has been foundational to helping us achieve our goal of making a real, functional reproduction from history. Without further ado, let's hand it over to Will West.
Hello, my name is William West and welcome to Dragon Armoury. It's really good to Joel and the team at Iron Crown Workshop all the way over the other side of the world in wonderful Australia to invite me to do a little bit with them on this next video about Italian gauntlets. I've just been asked to talk specifically about one or two features, and I just want to point out that what I'm about to share with you now is come about entirely from my own experience handling extant pieces of armour, and also my jousting experience wearing armour. A lot of guys have their own ways of going about things, and I'm not saying this is the definitive correct way of doing it, it's just my way of doing it. So in particular there's four points I'd like to talk to you about now briefly, and the first thing is that this gauntlet is obviously not an Italian gauntlet, although there are many similarities. This is my reproduction of an English style gauntlet of the late 15th century. It's based on a funeral effigy, so I'm recreating it in steel. Everything applies pretty much to this gauntlet as it does to the Italian gauntlet, and pretty much all gauntlets, because we all share the same thing, the hand, the human hand. And although they do vary in size and shape, and even numbers of fingers, there is obviously a lot of similarities. There are only small variations, and then that of course is accounted for when you build the armour specifically for a customer, an individual.
Now, of course, as Will mentioned, the gauntlet he has in his workshop is English, and the gauntlet that we have here is Italian. But no matter the style of gauntlet that you're trying to make, be it German, English, or Italian, it's an understanding the human anatomy and that function that becomes the foundational understanding that enables us to go in and make a gauntlet that actually works with the human body effectively in combat.
Point number one is the offset between the cuff and the metacarpal plate and the subsequent finger plates. So when we look at the human hand and the forearm, we can see there's a bias. When I relax, we can see that the center line through my hand is at a different angle to the center line through my forearm. This is common to all human beings, and it does vary depending on the individual, so it can be quite pronounced on some and not so much on others. Mine's about middling, I guess, and it all helps us with our grip. So this feature has to be included in the design of the gauntlet. So I've tried to mark this out to show you how this variation is accounted for, and you can see it's only a slight angle, it's around 10 degrees, maybe a bit more. It varies depending on the individual. So the offset is outward from the metacarpal, the hand plate, compared to the center line of the cuff. I'll also add, as a little bit of an additional variation as well, is our hands. When we go to grip something, our fingers roll inwards. We don't grip like that, we grip like this, gradually around. If I grab a hammer, and I roll my hands around it, this is how I hold it, like so. And it's the same with the haft of a weapon, the handle of a lance, or the grip of a sword. So to account for this slight variation, the plates that cover the fingers, these two large plates here, they also start to roll back in again in the opposite direction to account for that roll of the hand as you go to grip a weapon and ultimately find comfort in the grasping of it. Hopefully you can see that variation in the lines running through. The second point I want to raise is the overall shape of the gauntlet. Our hand is quite a broad, flat thing, not circular or round, certainly the wrist isn't. The thumb obviously rolls in. We've got this wonderful opposed thumb, which allows us to do so much, along with our four fingers, but the shape is quite flat, as is the wrist. So first thing to observe is that the gauntlet is obviously quite a bit broader, side to side, as it is top to bottom. There's a certain amount of depth I've provided here, greater than the human hand, which allows for motion of the hand within the gauntlet. I'll talk about that in a minute. But essentially, I'm mirroring or trying to mimic the shape and form of the human hand that go within this gauntlet.
Once again, it's in understanding that shape and movement of the human body that's super critical to making real armor. It's actually this point about the shape of the wrist that inspired us to reach out to Will West in the first place. And you can see us implementing this exact advice from Will West in our series on making these gauntlets, and you can follow the link in the top corner here to find out more about that. How cool is it that we have the build, the workshop, and the team to actually take on board advice from one of the world's best armorers and put that to use, both here and to share with you guys on YouTube. That is a dream come true.
So it's comfortable and it fits reasonably well. This is revealed most when you start to look through the end, and I don't know if you can see that, but if we took a section through the human wrist, it wouldn't be circular. It would in actual fact be like a flat oval with a flat bottom, a bit of a D shape in actual fact, and this is reflected in the shape of the metacarpal plate, where the hand slides through into that oval there. So that shape is critical. So the gauntlet is flat and wider, a flat D shape. That's important. The third thing I'd like to talk about is the articulation of the cuff. This is, as I say, not an Italian gauntlet, and I've based this on a stone effigy, so it's open to interpretation quite how this cuff articulated in real life on the real one, or whether it did at all. Probably did. So I've borrowed the design from the Italian gauntlet. In fact, the one that I handled up in Glasgow, which belongs to the Avant armour, the original right-hand gauntlet, mitten gauntlet that belongs with it. And this design of cuff articulation on the metacarpal I've borrowed across with one or two extra features that are mirrored or represented on the effigy. And so to get this articulation backwards and forwards to allow a good bit of motion, as like so. There's no side-to-side motion built into the cuff, but you can I'll show you how you can do that regardless, and that is provided for by the overlap and which will be rivets fastened here with plenty of clearance between them, which allows that. Now the cuff won't come off. Yeah, it's stuck unless these two rivets are removed. The cuff cannot come away from the main metacarpal plate. So that allows for quite a bit of motion. As for side-to-side motion, there's a good bit of flare in the cuff, which allows for plenty of that, even with the cannon in position. So that's that point covered. That's just the design of the Italian gauntlet overlaid onto this English one. The last point I'd like to talk about briefly is the clearance. How much clearance do we need over our gauntlets? Now the customer that has ordered this has a hand size that's pretty much identical to mine. Fingers slightly longer and the shape is subtly different, but generally speaking, so I know this fits me pretty well, it'll fit him well as well, with some subtle variations. So if I put my hand inside, you can see there's a good bit of clearance. Now I've got to open my hand right out to grasp my weapons, and when I close them up and my hand flexes, hopefully you can see there's still a good bit of clearance. Now I've not got a glove on yet either. Just as a brief aside, when I grip my weapon, you'll see the fingers and the thumb are exposed. These of course will have plates, articulated scale finger plates to protect those tips, and of course the thumbs as well, and they'll all be incorporated within the main mitten gauntlet for extra protection. So if I put a glove on now, just a basic leather glove, and I can still slide that on. Now all of a sudden my hand starts to fill the gauntlet, mitten part of the gauntlet quite substantially, a lot more. There's still a nice bit of clearance. We've also got to remember that we've got to have our scale finger plates all added on, and they take up quite a bit of space. You want to be able to move your hand freely, not just with the gauntlet, but within the gauntlet. You need to be able to manipulate your hand freely without fear of it jamming up, especially when your hand is gripping a weapon, or a hammer in this case, and your hand swells out sideways, but also when you've been fighting, your hand gets hot, it swells up even more. So you'll probably notice when you pull your gauntlets off after a fight, it's quite tricky getting them off, and that's partly because your hand's sweaty and the leather is all sticky, and it's not very easy getting it off, but it's also because your hand has just grown throughout the exertions.
This point that Will's sharing here actually was one that I learned a lot from and really appreciated from him sharing with us. Before reaching out to Will, a lot of the other points about the movement and the shape of the body we had forensically figured out here in the workshop, but this one about the air gap was new to me, and I really love it from the fact that it shows that the armorers of the time thought of everything. Not only is the anatomy of the body being mirrored and imitated in the steel, but they've even thought that one step further to think of allowing space for the subtleties and the micro movements of the human hand. Interestingly enough, that air gap may also lend itself to transferability between different pieces, like gauntlets or helmets or other pieces that an infantry harness might require. But once we get into skin-tight pieces like greaves and cuirasses that need to be custom fit, we're looking at a different level of armor anyways, and the transferability concept no longer applies.
Clearance on the inside. There's a lot of debate about this, and this is just my way of going about it. This is what I think. I'm not saying it's right, but I believe you need good clearance within these gauntlets. I don't believe in spray-on armour. There are elements, places where the armour fits you nice and snug and tight, certainly around the tummy, and maybe one or two areas around the calves and things like that. But generally, the reason why plate armour works so well is because there's a clearance between the inside surface of the plate and your body, in this case the hand. It's that air gap, as I call it. If you haven't got an air gap, if you're exerting yourself and your hand is squished out into this gauntlet and you get a blow there, it'll just go straight through, regardless of whether you've got a glove on. The glove doesn't offer any really impact resistance. It just stops rubbing of the plates on the skin. So there's got to be provision for your hand to move within that gauntlet when you're fighting. And of course there will be straps, and then the finger plates will be sewn to the gauntlet and also to the leather glove. So you will be constrained more than we are here, but you still need to be able to do this with inside to a certain degree so that you can manipulate your weapon freely. But also if you get a good blow, your hand can move away from the point of impact and it's not jammed in there to receive the impact through the plate. That's critical.
It's worth mentioning here that besides being one of the world's best armourers, Will is also an accomplished jouster, having performed at some of the world's most prestigious jousts like the Royal Armouries in England. What's really special about people like Will is that not only do they understand armour as an art form and as a functional object here in the workshop, technically, they also understand it practically, having used it in real life context. This makes them a wealth of knowledge that's invaluable, and having world experts like this here on our channel to share that with us makes this next point we're going to hear absolute gold.
So you take up your lance and you couch, like so. When you're in this couch position here, you need to be comfortable, of course. You've got the gun. I'm not going to do it with the gauntlet, the leather glove on. You just won't see what's going on. So the relaxed positions are like this, but you do need to sort of obviously grip the lance to some degree. And if you could see that, I used to be able to roll these two fingers and this third one in, support those two fingers like thus. And that is how you generally couch and hold the lance. The important thing to observe is that while I'm doing so, the straight line I was talking about between the back of the hand running through the forearm, that's the important bit. You don't want to be couching with a bent wrist that direction, certainly not that direction. You need to have a firm, solid line so that any force that comes down through that lance, and there'll be plenty when you get a good hard strike, or indeed if you get a lance come in and hit your hand at the back of your gauntlet, which happened to me several times, you want that force to run down through the straight line of the hand and into the forearm and the elbow, and therefore be absorbed and dissipated. If you've got a bent wrist in any way, or not couching quite right because your gauntlet isn't working or doesn't allow for that motion, that motion, remember that critical motion with inside the gauntlet, you can be in real trouble. Some guys joust without a right gauntlet and they do so successfully. Joran van Essen was renowned for that. He didn't wear a leather glove, just bare hand, but he was a big strong man. And I know others that just have a leather glove, and I thought, I'll try that. I don't need a metal gauntlet. I'm on the Easter tournament at the Royal Armouries, so I managed to dislocate this thumb twice in the same day, the first day, through hard ferrule strikes. Luckily managed to get it bandaged up and treated, and I carried on with a mitten gauntlet. I've soon got that out of the armour box, I can tell you. And what it taught me is that the armour supports you, around this joint here. Even though it's flexion movement, it'll get to a point where your wrist locks out and is supported. even when it's in a straight position. So that was critical. So that was all that was about, really. No, that helps. It's been a pleasure to join you guys. You do some great work there at Iron Crown Workshop. All the best. Will West signing out. Bye.
Jousting at the Royal Armouries tournament, death-defying balls of brass, and godlike armouring skills, Will, you're one heck of a guy. But from here at the Iron Crown Workshop team, we want to say thank you for taking the hits that we don't have to take so we can learn the lessons that we want to learn. In all seriousness, thank you so much for investing in our journey and choosing to come alongside us as we create a historically accurate suit of armour as correctly and as accurately as we possibly can. For any other armour-related influencers or experts, we actually welcome your insights and advice to our journey, and we look forward to doing more collaborations just like this one in the near future. But for now, Iron Crown Workshop, signing off.